Welcome to Business Owner Tales from the Trenches, the podcast for business owners who want to see around corners and thrive financially. Your host is Carr, CEO and business owner at CornerCap. Tune in every other week for lessons learned from the trenches of entrepreneurship, business successes, and financial independence. Here's Cannon.
Hello and welcome to the show. Cannon Carr and Claudia Bettinger here with you. Claudia, we have a great show today. It's December. We have the holidays coming. And in the spirit of the holidays, today's guest is somebody who is mission-driven with a service-oriented set of businesses as a serial entrepreneur, but yet has a keen eye on profitability and how the business works. And it's a great lesson about how to blend profit and purpose for impact. Why don't you introduce our guest?
Our guest today is Kashi Sehgal, and she is co-founder and CEO of 3 different businesses. She has a communications company, GigaBark. She's managing partner and co-founder of For Ethica, an ethics consulting company making the world more actively ethical. And during the 2020 pandemic, she co-founded Ritaza, a social impact food solutions company that rethinks the local supply chain.
This is a great show. This is somebody who's aware that the world is bigger than herself,
right,
but yet finds a thoughtful way to make it better on her own terms in ways that she can help, but with great lessons for anyone looking to build a profitable service-based business. As you go through this episode, keep maybe 3 things in mind. First, listen and count how many times she uses the word listen throughout the podcast. And we'll talk about this when we come back at the end. Second, listen how she finds that balance for profit, purpose, and impact. She points out it's impossible to maximize all 3 at any time. So how do you prioritize so that ultimately your mission is fulfilled? And third, just listen to her mindset and the unique way she talks about bootstrapping, making you creative. Listen to the word she uses instead of balance for her life. And a little bit, and listen to her thoughts about when is the right time to start a business. So sit back and enjoy this great episode with Kashi Sehgal. Kashi, thanks for being on the program. You know, we're going to get into your great mission-driven work, which I just love your background and what you've done. But first, let's go way back a little bit. I mean, you've at one point, even before starting your entrepreneur ventures, I think you worked for some larger global companies. And, when you look back at that and even back at your time at school, did you always want to be an entrepreneur?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I'm super honored to be part of this and be here with you.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I think I didn't know it was called entrepreneurship when I was little, but I always knew I wanted to run my own business or at least lead my own business. I didn't know that I would be starting it, but I think I always had an inkling that it would be something I created.
Did it well,
Yeah.
and I know you. I know some of your family too. I mean, I think there's a little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit kind of weaving through your family. I mean, did they kind of inspire you a little bit as well, or?
100%. I mean,
Yeah.
I think you see what is modeled for you, right? And so that's what you know, and that's what you do. And my dad created something. He ran a company, but he really created the scale and came up with new ideas and was always innovating. So really an entrepreneur, but I saw that entrepreneurship streak all the time, especially as he came to this country. And my mom was a professor, but also started a foundation and also is now writing books. So she has always had her own entrepreneurial streak, and they've always just encouraged that of both me and my brother.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So you did kind of start your career knowing a little bit where you wanted to head, maybe not found a company, but certainly try to run one. And you did have some stints with some global companies, I think, doing business development. What did you learn about yourself in that? And how did that prepare you ultimately for what you started doing today?
So I started my very first, I guess, adult job was at Accenture. And I learned so much there, mainly how to talk to customers and really dig in deep and understand what they need, gather requirements. It sounds kind of boring, but that process really helped me understand what I needed to do as I started my first business. And so I learned a lot there. And so from Accenture, I started my first company. And then, as you mentioned, I've stepped back into the corporate world a little bit here and there. And a lot of entrepreneurs, and I felt the same way, you get into the startup community and running your own business, and your identity is very much wrapped up in, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a founder. And so going back to the business world was an interesting transition for me, back to that big corporate world. But I learned so much, and you never know. You have these opportunities that present themselves. You have to say yes. I mean, why not? So I did it. I figured out a way for my company to run and I made it work for my life.
Right.
And, what I learned there at one of those businesses, one of those companies in global supply chain, I'm now working in hyperlocal supply chains. So, it's not so foreign, it's different, but you just never know what you've done in the past and where that's going to put you.
Yeah. What was that first business? Is that still running today, or was that something that started?
It is still running today. Yes. It's called GigaBark.
All right. That's GigaBark.
It's a technology company. So we do mobile communications, phone, text, email.
So that kind of grew out of you had that while you were working at Accenture. You did start that one, right? And then did you go full time there? And you said you came back into the corporate world. Did you go full time with GigaBark for a while, got it going, and then?
Yeah. So I've started a lot of different types of things.
Yeah.
I think the structure of the company and the initiative has to fit what you're trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. So I started GigaBark while I was at Accenture, yes, and quickly realized that my passion and my interest really laid with the company I was building. I didn't know a thing about mobile messaging and technology, but my business partner did. Mm-hmm. And I was like, cool, I can sell anything, whatever. Sure. Mm-hmm. No problem. I'll try it. And realized that my time would be better served there. We were growing with a percentage of my time being spent on that business. And then, so I left Accenture, ran GigaBark. And then from there, I started one of the largest tech and innovation conferences in the Southeast. So Supernova South, ran that for 8 years. It was a initiative that worked on economic development and tourism and education, and breaking down what I was seeing in the tech world was this bubble of groups of people working together, but not working across bubbles, across parts of the city. And I wanted to create a conference that had excellent content, excellent speakers, but was very democratic in who could attend. It wasn't price prohibitive. It was a community conference, but like at the most excellent level. And it was super fun. So, always trying to build something to help what I'm seeing at the time. Mm-hmm. So it was community building. Yeah. Yeah.
And we'll get to that, right? Because I think there is a purpose, and we'll ultimately get to, I'm just fascinated how all this gets woven together, right? Because when you look at what you're doing, there are a lot of different disparate things. So, all right. So you had GigaBark going, you had Supernova South going, or Communications Nova South, and maybe, but you also had, I think at some point maybe those two kept maybe going for maybe a decade, but I know eventually you had some other ideas factor in too. So maybe just bring us on that timeline. What was the next venture you started, and how that got started?
I'm trying to think back. So,
I know, Rataza is something you've started doing recently too. And,
right.
For Ethica. So, weaving each of those, maybe just talk just for a minute on each about how those seeds started.
Yeah. So I was running GigaBark, then Supernova South at the same time. And then I went to the corporate world. I did a stint there working for a global company, actually 2 global companies, 2 different companies back to back. And then really that's when the pandemic hit. I always had GigaBark. So always had my own project functioning in the background. So that gave me a lot of creative outlet for the energy that I had. And when the pandemic happened, I realized, like a lot of people, that I had a lot of time not going to events and not sitting in traffic. So I was on a task force that the lieutenant governor had convened at the time to figure out how to make Georgia the innovation capital of the East Coast. And we were looking for new ideas and what to do. I didn't want to be on the technology committee. I had a sense that that was going to be more about funding and those types of resources, accelerators. So I was on public innovation, and this task force happened just as the pandemic hit, and we were seeing people throwing out produce, farmers throwing out produce by record numbers, and people lined up at food banks in their cars in record numbers. And I just wanted to figure out how to introduce the two. I just thought, why are we throwing out food when people need it?
Yeah.
So Rataza was formed at that point. And Forethica, which is my other business, also formed at that point out of discussions that I was having with the Center for Ethics at Emory, serving on the board, as you know, with you.
Yep.
And those conversations all started happening at the same time. So I'm not sure I would necessarily recommend this to anybody else, but basically started two businesses at the same time.
Right. So how do you
only do that during a total lockdown?
During maybe a total lockdown? Well, but it's an interesting theme here. So a couple questions. So so ideas come to you. How do you prioritize and filter those? I mean, and are you deliberate in that, or is it more just like you said, opportunity arises and you say yes? How do you know what to say no to? So help us think through that a little bit.
It's a great question. I do have a lot of ideas. You experience the world, and if you are a why asker, why does this happen? Why does this work that way? You want to figure out how to make things operate better, more efficiently, more impactful. How can we do more? And so, yeah, it is a challenge. My brain is always working. But the other thing is, I don't feel the need for everything to be my thing or my idea. I'm happy to share ideas, and I'm happy to support others and their great work and their great ideas. So I think you have to figure out what idea you have that just will not go away, that just won't stop bugging you, and where you find something that is really becoming a passion that you keep wanting to explore, keep wanting to dig into. That's what happened with me and Rataza. I was not in local food. I have never bought a bushel of any kind of produce in my entire life. And I just could not understand why local food was so expensive and so hard to access. It just did not compute, given that Georgia is an agriculture state. It's the biggest industry here, $75 billion industry, and there are farms everywhere. Why is it so hard to find local food? It just could not wrap my brain around that. And then also why we were throwing it out when people need it.
Right.
So I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I think, to me, that's my litmus test of what I focus on and spend my energy on, but happy to support everybody else's good ideas too.
Yeah, no, I've seen you in action. I mean, when you need to, you step in the spotlight. When you are supportive, the spotlight goes somewhere else, but you're still involved, and it is pretty amazing. I love how you've articulated that. So the idea won't go away; it'll keep bugging you, and it forces you to keep exploring. How do I solve this problem and optimize around it? So it does germinate for a while before you, I guess, jump in, right? And for Rataza. How long had you thought about that and done kind of maybe that your own research is maybe a loose word, because I think you were looking for connections, you were learning about the industry. How long did that take before you launched, and how did you actually turn that business on?
Yeah. So I got the benefit of being in a total lockdown, and people had time. Although I feel like in Georgia, definitely in Atlanta, we are unique in that we want to help each other. And so people are very kind and generous with information and just connecting you to different people and helping you get to where you're trying to go. So I went on a listening tour.
Yep.
I talked to anyone and everyone that would talk to me, from grocers to distributors, nonprofits working with our hungry, farmers, actual neighbors who are hungry, whoever I could find, to understand what was going on. And I had not set out with the intention of creating a company. My goal was to find those entities that already existed that were supporting our farmers with the food that they aren't able to sell, and figure out how to amplify what they're doing and put some support mechanisms in underneath them. What I realized was that there were a few needs within this local food ecosystem, a lot of great work happening, but not specifically helping farmers with their food waste at the scale at which it happens.
Mm-hmm.
So this listening tour provided so much. I was starting to see trends and understand people were saying the same things. And I heard that people weren't talking to each other. Organizations weren't talking to each other, but all this great work was being done. And if this organization just helped this organization do this, they could solve both of their issues, So Rataza emerged. So at some point I knew too much. And I was like, still not enough, but I knew enough to know that somebody needed to step in and do something. And I looked around and was like, oh, I guess that's me.
Right.
So
You were so called. Did that require, were you able to kind of bootstrap your way into running that business? Did it take a little upfront capital to get it started? How did you get a funding mechanism going?
Yeah, I've bootstrapped all of my businesses.
Yep.
I think it makes you more creative. We definitely had an advisor and supporter that gave us some money to turn the lights on, just a little bit of cash. But it was more symbolic of, I believe in this idea and believe in you. Please try this. We need it. And so I was off and running and still have not raised any dollars. Although, we've gotten some grants. There's a lot of money out there to support local food ecosystems right now.
Mm-hmm.
So we've gotten some non-dilutive capital, but growing through revenue, which I think is the best way.
So do you actually require a profit level first so that which in other words, what's your growth philosophy, right? Or is it about the top line? Is it about the service? And most importantly, about the profits along the way before you get in over your head on the growth? How do you think about that?
Business. This is a great question. We are a purpose-driven business. We're a social enterprise. You have to exist as a business in order to actually serve your mission. Mm-hmm. So, yes, what are we doing to grow and thrive as a business? That is a very fundamental question. But to me, that has multiple parts.
Mm-hmm.
Growing and thriving is dollars, but growing and thriving is also the impact that we're having on our stakeholders. Yep. Both are equally important. One does not outrank the other, but priorities shift. And so, nearing the end of the year, are we hitting our revenue targets? Are we set for next year? Those are ideas that are now consuming my brain more than what kind of impact are we having? Have we worked with enough farms this year? How are we really supporting them? How much are we contributing to the health and wellness of our communities around the state through healthy food and access? All of those questions are things I think about year round. But if we don't have a business to run, I can't support anybody. So It has to go hand in hand.
So you've articulated that beautifully. So there are trade-offs, right? Depending on which one is the priority at the time. So I guess there's some projects or impact efforts you might say we have to wait till next year or wait till the right kind of funding or partner shows up and is in place. And is that hard to do? Does that require this commitment to discipline, or is it more just that reality of nope, cash flow matters?
It's hard to do. I'm impatient. I want to do everything now, but you do have to wait, and it does make you a responsible leader, right? You can't do everything all at once, and you shouldn't. You should explore, see what works, be thoughtful about how you're growing and expanding. If I had the money to go hire 10 people right now, I probably wouldn't do it because I want to add people in the right places at the right time. Mm-hmm. Adding headcount adds a lot of other complexity to the business. And so that's not always the right answer. Right. We're at a place now where that would certainly be helpful. But at the beginning of this year, definitely weren't there. So
I love
you have
what
to
you're
do
doing
things at the right time.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about Rataza, and I love what you're doing there. What is the ultimate goal, or where do you want that to ultimately head? If you look over the next 5 or 10 years, where can that go?
I'll answer with those two streams in mind, profit and purpose. Mm-hmm. purpose first. I hope that we eliminate hunger from our neighborhoods, and I hope that all farmers are selling what they produce. That would bring economic stability to our farms and our small towns across the country, and it would make us a more whole society. I think I would like to work ourselves out of a job. If that is not something that happens, we're going to be a national company in the next 3 years, creating hyper local networks. So think of us as a hyper local food distributor that does a lot of things with the money that it generates. We want to create these hyper local nodes of farm serving or selling to customers all over the country. So, think of us as total US domination in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. Well, which ambitious. And I know you've focused, we've talked a lot about the Georgia markets, but you've already expanded into some other states or have some relationships headed that way, it sounds like.
Yes. So knock on wood, we've got some contracts in the works that will very quickly make us a regional company, allow us to serve some really amazing customers across the Southeast, and iterating and making sure that that model works across the Southeast then means we can go anywhere.
Yeah, so. That's awesome. Well, I can't, you're already validating the model. I can't wait to hear more about that. So as that goes. All right. So let's go back to the question though. So to me, that sounds like that's going to require 150% of your time. So how do you balance? What's the secret? How do you balance between this great worthy business, GigaBark, which is still going, and Forethica, which I know you are passionate about, as well as a lot of the, just community service work you do. So but just focus on those three businesses. How do you balance your time? How do you stay sane and productive?
Well, sane is definitely
relative term, maybe.
Relative. Yes. I love impact and I love what I do. I don't wake up and I know people say you never work a day in your life if you love what you do. I work, but I love it. I wake up thinking about it and I go to bed thinking about it. And people talk about balance. To me, life is not about balance. It's a great term in theory, but balance means there are, going back to physics, two equal and opposite forces working against each other. Right? And I don't want anything in my life working against each other. I want things working in harmony with each other. So I think it's a harmony thing. It's the word I like. And there are days and weeks where Rataza takes 100% of my time. I can't do this without amazing people and teams in the other projects and businesses that I'm working in. It's not the Kashi show. It is, how do we achieve whatever the mission and purpose is of what we're trying to do? And it doesn't need to be me there to do it. I might be the one helping eliminate roadblocks and clear the way and make things easier and help the team figure things out. But that's what it's about. It's bringing people along to help do this great work, because I certainly can't do all of it. And it can't be me doing things across the country. We have to have great people.
So each of the three businesses, in some right, depending on its size, has that support team that you've put in place. And what do you look for in people who are complimenting you in the work you're doing and the leadership you're providing?
This might sound crazy, but the first thing I look for is a positive attitude. Because if you're positive, can do, let me figure it out, you can work with anybody. You want the team that you're working with, you want to enjoy working with the people that you're working with, right? That's the first motivator. Otherwise, you're not going to want to wake up and have that call with that person, right? So that's the first thing. From there, attention to detail. Everything I do, I think you have to get, the big picture is great, and it helps you understand where you're going. But the way you get there with excellence is through being excellent on the details. And so I think you have to find people who care about the details and care about the mission. So I think maybe those are the couple of things that I look for. Everything else is teachable.
That's a great point. So on the details side, are you the one digging into the details, or you actually have people who are maybe either better at that than you or just closer to the action where you outsource that to them and then they tell you what details are important? How does that work?
It's always helpful to find people who are really good at the details, but sometimes you need to do training around it. And I either have the blessing or the curse that I love the big picture, but I also love the details. Because to me, like I said, I think that's where you get things right. I do a lot of training on details, a lot of training. But when I find that rare person that loves details and gets them right as much as I feel like I do, I snatch them up immediately. But also, there's someone on my team right now that I created a position for, even though we weren't ready for it, created a position for because I loved her attitude. And I was like, she's going to be the right person to add to our team. And she's going to be a crucial component of how we build the company. And so I knew I had to have her. Right.
That's cool.
So,
you don't have to get too specific. What position did you create?
She runs all of our markets. So our community markets and community programming.
For Rataza. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is there anybody who's links across the different companies or each one's truly distinct outside of your time?
Just me. Yeah. Truly distinct.
Yeah. So is there a master plan across all of them, or is it really just that mission driven and each one might succeed or fail on its own right or grow in its own right at its own pace? Or is there some kind of master plan for Kashi?
I haven't thought about it quite that way, about a master plan. The goal is really to help as many people as possible. I think my personal why and my personal purpose is to create a meaningful impact on someone's life, even if it's one person, because you don't know the ripple you're going to have, even with that one person. But if I can maximize the number of people I'm having impacts on, and those ripples can become more and more, great. And so I want all the businesses and all the organizations that I work with to be a force for good in the world. I think that's the master plan, and to leave this world better off in some ways than before I entered it. And we do have the opportunity to work across company to actually get the work done. There are a lot of ways that the companies support each other. Rataza is trying to reach members in the community, and just so happens I have a communications company that knows how to do that. So, we can all be supportive and work together in that way, but there's no master plan necessarily.
And I didn't expect one, but sometimes there's something to discover in there, and it's kind of neat. But I think you articulate, it's just your own passions about where to truly leave the world a better place. And, one of my questions, but you've already answered it, is, how do you rank, purpose, impact, and profit as in terms of that hierarchy? But correct me if I'm wrong. I think you basically say, they're all important at any given time. You got to have profit so that you succeed. But ultimately, it is about that purpose.
Yeah. And I think you can't do one without any of the others. All three of those are so important, priority shift, but I think you can't do any of those without data.
That's a great point. Yeah. It's got to be
unless you're measuring what you're doing. Yeah. Unless I look at our books every week, the standing meeting, and I make sure across every company, I know exactly what's going on. I know the dollars. I know how many people we're feeding at Rataza, how many pounds of food we're buying, how many pounds of food we've rescued. Unless you are measuring impact through actual numbers and storytelling, there's qualitative and quantitative data. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But unless you're gathering all of these things, you do not know what kind of impact you're having. Purpose is great, but to what end?
Yeah, that's a great point. You got to measure the impact to know if it's working,
and profit is great. Yeah. But to what end? Yeah. How are you helping people?
No, it's great. So let's pivot a little bit. So you balance leadership between service support, to those who are leading, maybe doing whatever initiative you're doing, you'll step back. But at the same time, in that leadership, you're providing one way or the other. When is it important to stay stubborn about the vision, and when do you pivot and be flexible? And how do you know? How have you come to terms between those two?
I think people will call me stubborn. I think as a leader, you are the ultimate champion or guardian of the company's mission and purpose. And so I think you have to be really stubborn about what you're doing and why, but not necessarily about how you're doing it. I don't think you should get stuck on, well, this is the idea, so this is what we're doing. One of the things I haven't mentioned yet, but I think is of the utmost importance, and one of the skills that I really try to train all teams is about listening and hearing. You have to listen. You have to make space and time to listen to what is going on. I'll give you an example with Rataza. As my role, right now I'm the sole purpose. My sole purpose is to grow the company and across all factors, right? And so one of those things is sales. And last year, one of the verticals that we created was we're killing it. We're flying off the shelf with clients. And it was great. So I had this whole plan for this year of how we were going to bring on more clients for that vertical. And apparently the economy is trying to do something very different, and companies are nervous about spending money, and it's affecting sales. But we have this other vertical that I hadn't placed much value in. I thought it was something we would do, but it wouldn't be our main focus. It is flying off the shelf this year. And the other vertical that was doing so well last year wasn't doing great. And I had to take a step back, not be stubborn about the how, which I think is cooler and way more interesting, and focus on this boring but necessary service that we can offer that is going to help us get to our mission and serve more people. And guess what? As a result, we get to create some systems change that we may not have had doing this cool new thing that we created. So you have to listen. You have to be stubborn about the why and the what, but I don't think you need to be stubborn about the how.
Wow. Yeah, exactly. In fact, you probably don't want to be stubborn about the how, because that's going to be the flexibilities want to get you through those unknowns, right? So no, that's a great example.
I think that's also true for like your team too. I mean, I for sure am a perfectionist, but running your own business quickly tells you that is not a skill that you want, a trait that you want. And the same thing with your team. They may not do things the way you want them to be done, but the why and the what that they're accomplishing is the same. How they do it may be a little different. And sometimes that's good and sometimes that's not. But generally, you want to give them flexibility to be their own person.
No, that's a great point. And perfectionist, you're right. That's probably a recipe for not having it succeed. So great point. Well, I wanted to just hear a little bit. So how do you, I don't know if each company has a board of directors or if you have your own kind of board of directors that it just advises you. How have others helped you just in terms of advice and guidance? Like, we talk about an ecosystem, for example. And I know you build an ecosystem in your businesses. Who've been some mentors? You don't have to be specific, but what have you put in place, or what do you have in place that helps you see around corners to avoid a bad decision?
Seeing around corners. To me, that is a skill that I wish I had. My husband can see around corners very well. And I am often envious of his ability to see what's coming, trends in the future. I think you have to.
I mean, these are people, are there people, I don't want to cut you off. I mean, are there people who you turn to that help you minimize the risk of a bad decision? That's
100%.
Yeah.
You can't do it without. And you use a term that I really love, your board of advisors. Yeah. I think everybody, definitely I do, has a personal board of advisors. And much like a board, you have people serve a specific role or a more general role. And I have all of that. I think I could not do this without mentors, without advisors. I would say the first group of people I would put on that group are my parents, my brother, my husband. I mean, those, the people you trust, like you also want to hear what they have to say. It's important. They're all smart, very successful people that see the world differently too, similarly and differently. So they're my litmus test. But I have people in healthcare, Gigabark does a lot of work in healthcare. I've got people in healthcare. I've got farmers that I turn to. You've got to have people that you can bounce ideas off of and go to when you really just don't know. You just need to talk to someone.
Mhm.
You got to have a support system.
Yeah,
especially
absolutely.
working for yourself. There's really no one at the top, like no one above me that's going to pat me on the back and say, good job or terrible job, or you shouldn't have done this. Like I'll find out the hard way. So instead of finding out the hard way, I'd rather talk it through with somebody and just figure out maybe not the right way forward, but the best way forward.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. So, well, last question for you. I mean, we often say, what advice would you give our listeners? I mean, I think you, in many respects, have already given that advice. I mean, you've captured things so well. So I'll ask instead, what do you wish you knew then, that you knew then, way back when, that you've learned now that would have made your journey easier?
I think this is only a piece of advice that, like, you can tell people, but you learn with experience. But I think one very important thing for me has been, don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody had given me the green light, if I had waited for the green light to get started starting my first business, I may never have started.
Mm-hmm.
I was on a path. I was working for a big fancy consulting agency and had gone to grad school and done all the things to get to that point. And starting my own company was completely out of left field, especially, entrepreneurship was definitely a concept and a thing that we did in my family. But I think maybe later in life was going to be the idea for when I started.
Mm-hmm.
Not giving up a great job at the beginning of my career. Right. So don't ask for permission. If you feel called and you've done the work and you responsibly can make this decision, do it.
Yeah.
What are you waiting for?
And we won't go back too far, but I don't want to gloss over it. You did make a great point. I mean, you were having success at Accenture, and it came a little bit out of left field, although we understand it didn't really, about starting Gigabark. Just pause for a second. How did you know when the time was right to do that first venture? Because you said, you're right. If you'd waited for everything to be perfect, wait for that green light, it might have never happened. There's never a perfect time. So how did you know when to get out and do that and then ultimately go full time?
I mean, ultimately, I didn't know if it was the right time, right? It's always nerve-wracking. Oh my gosh, are we really going to do this? You feel that way every time. Even now starting Rataza and Verethica, you still feel like, okay, should we just get started? Is it time? You never quite know, but at some point you have enough information to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
Not all the information, enough. So look, I went to my board of advisors at the time, my parents, and I was like, and my brother. And I was like, look, I told actually my brother first, look, I started this company and I think it's going pretty well and I'm not really sure what to do. And at some point we were having more success with just a fraction of my time. And I created a business plan and presented it to my parents and was like, all right,
that's awesome.
So here's the plan. It was my first real big sales pitch, right? If I could sell that to them, I felt like I could sell anything. And I did. I was like, look, I'm going to go do this company. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to go back and get a real job.
Yeah.
I never looked back.
Oh, that's awesome. No, that's great. Well, I did think of one other question, and it comes a little bit out of left field, but I know originally you minored in music back in college. Is that still part of your life at all, music in some way, or is that a release for you in your usual busy schedule, or is that something that you'll have to get back to that in the future?
Both. So I love music. It will always be a part of me. I made myself minor in music. I sang my entire life. I think I started singing when I was like 3.5, 4, something like that, and sang all the way until I was maybe 25, 26, and love it. I love everything about being part of a choir, singing on your own, just the different dynamics. I was always in band. my whole family's musical. My brother is having a lot of success in the music world right now, and he's very good at what he does. My parents are both musical. So it's a big part of life. And it's always a passion of mine. It's not one that I have formally tackled yet, although in grad school I did manage bands in Atlanta. I'll get there. I think
you'll get there. That's awesome.
All the passions are coming together. Sustainability was a huge passion of mine and not something I had worked in until now. So, everything happens at the right time. Life is about timing.
Yeah, no, it's about timing. So
you just have to listen.
There you go. You're exactly right. Listen for the right time and answer the call, as you said. So, well, Kashi, this has been awesome. I've had so much fun. I knew a lot of your story, but I didn't know all of it. And it's just, it's just great insights and lessons for people on purpose-driven work. So thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. All right. Welcome back to the studio. Claudia and Cannon here with you. Claudia, just a wonderful episode on all levels, particularly just for the holiday season and the spirit of giving and service, but with business in mind, right? I thought it was great. What resonated with you before we jump into our summary conclusions? What
really resonated with me is just how motivated she is to be running 3 businesses and find the time for all of them. And that each are so unique in what they do. She really gives herself a chance to pursue all of her passions. And I just think that that's really admirable.
Yeah. Totally. It's inspiring. Mm-hmm. It really is. Well, let's maybe highlight those 3 takeaways that we try to do at the end of each show. The first one is the word listen. I loved how she used the word listen. I meant to go back through and count how many times, but I did notice, whether it was at the beginning, whether it was in the middle, at the end, that word kept cropping up. Mm-hmm. And I know you actually had the same reaction.
Yeah, absolutely. When she spoke about starting Rataza, she went on a listening tour before she started the business to find the places where Rataza could actually help and where she could benefit it. She knew that she was passionate about helping, but she needed to find the place for her business. And I think that's so important for every business owner to go out and listen and make sure that you are a solution for the community.
Totally. That's how you find the problems and the solutions. But what was neat? I mean, and listening is the key to her success, I think, underneath it, in a way, maybe one of her superpowers and key to her approach. I noticed back even when she said her first job back at Accenture, what really helped her get started was how she had to do research to learn what specific client needs were at Accenture. And, if you know the consulting world, that's a key part of your job is understanding what the client needs. So, listening even back in that first job was so key, but that's how she continues to source and develop ideas. That's how she uncovers problems, uncovers solutions. And in listening, she connects on 2 levels. One, that's how she connects with knowledgeable people to learn things. But 2, that's how she connects the dots between people who are doing interesting things, but maybe not communicating with each other. So there's really some magic in that listening and connecting that she does. And I noticed she actually said that's how she trains her team too. She trains her team to listen. And your example with Rataza is just so wonderful, and I think it's key to how she, she says stubborn. She talked about being stubborn on her what and why, but very flexible on how. And listening is the key to that how. So I just love that. I thought it was great.
Me too.
The second thing I thought take away was just how she balanced profit and purpose. She said, you can't maximize the 2 at any one time, but it is a function of priorities, timing, and circumstances that one might get emphasis over the other. I know with Rataza at the end of this year, she's actually more focused a little bit more on profitability, right? Mission will take care of itself a little bit later when she comes back to focusing on that. And I noticed you had some similar thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, she does say that her goal is to help as many people as possible, but in order to do that, you need to create meaningful impact, which you need money and numbers to show for it. And I think that that's really responsible and a great view to have. And I think she demonstrates that by speaking about pivoting her verticals. Something that she thought was really going to work, that was really innovative, ends up not being that profitable this year. And so you pivot, and now she's working on something that maybe isn't quite as interesting, but she's being profitable and she's out there helping people. And that at the end of the day, that's what really matters to her.
Yeah, no, it really is. And you make it a great point. I mean, on impact, she measures that too, right? So it is data driven. She wants to measure the impact she's having. That's how she knows success. But profit is also the key to success, because profit is what means, as she said, you have to exist as a business, because otherwise you're not going to fulfill your mission. So listening to her balance that dynamic, I thought was really cool. And finally, the third takeaway for us was just listening to her mindset, which is just wonderful to get into her mind and hear how she balances all these things as a serial entrepreneur. One comment she said was, bootstrapping makes you more creative. And we have heard that from other entrepreneurs. I think there's a lot of truth to that. If you have limited means or a limited budget and you need to do something, you're going to find a way to get it done. And that often leads to an innovation, or it leads to a new way of doing something. So a lot of truth to that. Did you notice the word she used instead of balance?
Yes, she used the word harmony instead of balance, which I loved.
Yes, I thought it was awesome. So she said, balance is two forces competing to each other, two equal forces in conflict. And she said, I like the word harmony better. And in that, I think she's saying, when she needs to lean in and lead, she does so. When she needs to back off and be supportive, she does so. And that's how she juggles all these multiple ventures in a harmonious way. I just thought it was a beautiful, beautiful concept there. And also, I thought it was neat just her mindset of when to start a business.
Right. Absolutely. I love that she says, don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. And if you feel called to something, go. Do the research, make sure that you're knowledgeable in it, but go for it.
Right.
Don't let things hold you back.
And she says you never know if it's the right time. And we hear that from many business owners and entrepreneurs. You can't wait for that obvious green light because it'll never come. She said you just have to have enough information to make a decision. And I love how she said this, and you mentioned it, when you feel called to do it, when that idea persists, and she talked about that and won't go away, and that you can manage the decision responsibly. That's the time really to go ahead and take that chance and step in. And I just thought it was a wonderful message for all of us. Well, Claudia, as usual, thanks for thinking through these wonderful episodes with me. And today was no exception. We loved it with Kashi, and we hope everyone enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Are you looking for more resources to help your business? Visit cornercappodcast.com for our free ebooks to help you plan for inevitable transitions in your business. Tune back in every other week for a new episode.